Well, hi folks. It's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon here, getting set up for our live Q&A here. And I think we got things working. If you are out there and can see me or hear me, send me a comment. Let me know. Gonna get myself up on the phone so I can make sure things are working here. All right, let's have a look-see. All right, I think I'm on. Okay. Cheryl, thanks for joining me. Everything working okay? Again, it's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. Send a comment. Let me know if you can see and hear me. Thanks a lot. As we're getting started here, wanted to give a quick sort of update on the Christmas bird counts that took place. Started talking about Christmas bird counts last week, but I got a little bit distracted. So I'll come back around to that. Cheryl, good afternoon. Thank you for joining. Looks like people can see and hear me, so that's great. So the Christmas bird counts took place. They take place anywhere between December 14th and January 4th each year. The last one I did was New Year's Day on January 1st, and that was my 6th one. And it was a lot of fun to start the new year off counting birds. I had a great day, lots of birds around. I was down in the Milford area as part of the Nashua Hollis Christmas bird count. So it was lots of fun. And I wanted to give a general report. We obviously don't have the Christmas bird count data yet, but general comments from the different counts that I did and other ones that I talked to people about were that there were good numbers of birds around. Lots of chickadees, lots of blue jays. There were lots of northern finches in the southern part of the state. That's our pine siskins, our red poles, common red poles. Both red and white-winged crossbills were around, pine grosbeaks around. On the northern part of the state, those species had already moved through. We're getting some of those northern species because food supplies up north are not great, and that includes north of the White Mountains. So there weren't very many siskins up there. There weren't very many red poles up there, or pine grosbeaks, or red-breasted nuthatches. But down in the southern part of the state, we did have good numbers of all of those species. So it made for really a great Christmas bird count season. There were loads of red-breasted nuthatches. Many of you have been reporting them coming to your feeders. So their numbers were higher on the CBC this year. So at least in the southern part of the state. So that reflects that they're around here. And we have such a great white pine cone crop still that's where the crossbills were feeding. I had white-winged crossbills and red crossbills in Milford, and lots of red-breasted nuthatches in those pine cones, feeding up in the white pine trees. So overall, numbers appear to be good on the Christmas bird counts. Of course, when we actually get the data all compiled, we'll have a better sense of that. But the numbers sounded good. So it was very fun, and Christmas bird counts are a lot of fun to do. They are much more specific. I mentioned last time they take place in designated count circles. Those circles are 15 miles in diameter, and so you count all the birds within that circle. And usually it's quite a team of people that helps to do that, divide the circle up into different sectors, and each person takes their piece of the pie. So the Christmas bird count started back in 1900, and there were, let's see, I made a little note, there were 25 counts in 1900. That was the first year that they were done, and they were done as an alternative to a hunting competition where teams went out and shot as many live wild animals as they could, both furs and feathers. And this alternative count was proposed by Frank Chapman for birders to go out and count the birds rather than shooting the birds. And it's really taken off. Keene, New Hampshire actually did a count in that very first year in 1900 when there were just 25 counts. But last year, we don't have the number of counts this year yet, but last year there were thousands of counts. It's actually gone sort of international. It's in Canada, it's in Mexico, and it's just a tremendous effort now. I'm looking for my numbers because I wrote down how many counts there were, and of course I can't find it. But oh yeah, there were 2,646 counts last year. 1,992 are in the U.S., 469 in Canada, and they're also in Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Pacific Islands. So even if you're on vacation, you can do a Christmas bird count. It's great. That first count in Keene, there were just a few species seen on it. Black-capped chickadee, all 16 birds, one crow and one shrike. Of course, it was only one person who did it, and it was only for a few hours. So how things have changed. It's actually terrific to have that going on. So hi to folks, Diane, Patsy, Blaine, David, thank you for joining. Again, it's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. If you have a question or something you've seen recently, don't hesitate to post a comment. I'm getting comments on my phone, so it should work. And if you're watching this later as a recording, you can always post a message on Facebook to us, or you can email us at birdsetc, BIRDSETC @NHAudubon.org. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions. So thanks for joining me. And what else did I want to mention? Oh yes, that we've got the Christmas bird count. Now that period is done. New Hampshire Audubon's backyard winter bird count will be coming up. Second weekend in February. You can find information about that online. You can get forms online, or you can email us your mailing address and we'll send you a packet of information. But that's coming up. That takes place everywhere in the state, so it doesn't matter where you live. You can take part. It's on the second weekend in February, which is the 13th and 14th. And all you need to do is watch your feeders and count the birds that you see at your feeders. You can do it anytime on the weekend. You watch for the entire weekend. You can watch for 20 minutes on the weekend. It's very flexible, but the idea is for us to get counts from throughout the state so we can watch and see what's happening with our winter bird populations. And it should be very interesting this year to see what we've got, where our northern birds are. Do we still have pine siskins and redpolls around in February, or have they moved on? Are our red-breasted nuthatches still around? So I encourage you to take part in that. You can get a link from the New Hampshire Audubon website, or just Google Backyard Winter Bird Survey, New Hampshire Audubon, and it should get you there. Anybody can take part. And so I'll just give you a couple of tips. I'll be continuing to talk about the survey, but this is a good time to sort of practice watching because what we want you to record is the maximum number of any one species that you see at once at your feeder. So if you see 4 blue jays at 9 o'clock in the morning and 10 blue jays at 11 o'clock, your count is 10. You don't add them together. And this is a good time to sort of practice how you do that. So that's coming up. Hope you can join us on that. I took a walk out this morning. I've started a yearly survey. It's just probably a 1.5 to 2 mile walk that I'm going to try and do each week and see if I can spot changes in our birds. It'll help me get outside, help me do some birding. It's a great thing to do during COVID-19. So this morning I had quite a lot of actually robins because my route takes me through some fruit trees and they were coming in to feed on fruit. And robins are a really interesting bird because we never used to see them in the wintertime. And then they started becoming more and more common. And I think it was in 1996 when numbers really started to go up in the winter. And they will feed on fruit in the wintertime. You know, we think of them as feeding on worms, and they will feed on worms, but when the ground is frozen, they'll feed on fruit and whatever insects they can find on open patches of lawn that's, you know, when the sun hits it and the snow is melted, the ground unfreezes a little bit, they'll hop around looking for whatever they can find in that open area. Now, a lot of people have been seeing bluebirds lately, and they've done something very similar to what the robins did. We never used to see them in the wintertime, and now we do. So I went back and took a look at the Backyard Winter Bird Survey data on robins to see when we really first started seeing some pretty good numbers of them. And the first time we had them on the survey was in 1989. Now, the survey expanded in 1987 to cover all species. Before that, it was only some of the southern species that had moved into the state. So we used to monitor for cardinals, tufted titmice, and mockingbirds, and mourning doves. And then in 87, it expanded to all species. So our bluebirds, the first ones we had, there were 6 of them on the entire survey in 89, and only 1 in 1990. And then there weren't any others until 94, when there were only 2. And then the first time we got into double digits was in 1995. And then in 2003, we finally broke 100, and that was 119. And it took 6 years before we then broke 200. And then things really started to go up. And we broke 1,000 in 2015. So more than 1,000 bluebirds. And then last year we had a record number of bluebirds, 1,224. So basically the last 10 years or so, we've really seen a dramatic growth in wintering bluebirds. So they can be around in the winter. And you can also put some food out for them if you would like. You can put out fruit, but a lot of people put out mealworms for them. You can get them at the store. You can get tray feeders that you can put the mealworms on. And then bluebirds will come to suet, and then sometimes they'll eat sunflower hearts. Their bills aren't adapted to break open the sunflower seeds, but they can certainly eat the sunflower hearts. Marie, yes, you have 4 bluebirds daily at your suet feeder in Lee. One of the things that we're likely to see is more bluebirds in the southern part of the state and the southeastern part of the state where there's less snow cover. Now, why have bluebirds and robins started being here over the winter? We really don't know, but there are a couple of educated guesses that we can make. So the top 2 theories are: one, milder winters. We definitely have had some milder winters. Climate change has um, been occurring, and those milder winters have resulted in less snow cover and more open areas where the birds could get food. More of those field areas, woodland areas that get the sun and melt the snow, little creeks that stay open where there may be some insects in the leaves around the wet areas. And then also, people have been planting more ornamental fruit trees, crabapple trees, and then some of our native things like winterberry. You know, that shrub, it's a deciduous shrub. It has all those red berries on it. They're in wetlands usually, and they hold on to those berries into the wintertime. And after the berries has gone through some freezing and thawing, they seem to be a little more palatable to the birds, and that's another thing that bluebirds will eat. Sumac, they will eat. So any of these things that have berries that stay on into the wintertime, the bluebirds will feed on. And then the third thing that's probably influenced bluebirds is people putting out a variety of food that they can actually eat. And that includes suet and the mealworms and the sunflower hearts. So it's quite likely a combination of all three when it comes to bluebirds. When it comes to robins, they tend not to come in for suet. They don't come in for mealworms. So they're getting the fruit, and so it's probably not people feeding that's had an impact on robins. That certainly is likely to have had an impact on bluebirds. All right. If you have any other observations or questions, don't hesitate to post a comment on that. So there are bluebirds and robins. I hope that you had a chance to see the feature plant that we just posted on Facebook, which is the red cedar or juniper. Um, there are a couple of different native junipers, but this one, the juniper that we often call the red cedar, has little blueberries and is a sort of a shrubby tree. It doesn't grow up into a big tall tree. It's a shorter type tree, but it's dense and it's evergreen and it provides great cover for birds. And then birds will also eat the little blueberries. And one of the photos in that post is a palm warbler that was at one of those junipers at Odeon Point State Park in Rye that I saw. And I've tried planting some small juniper trees that I got from the New Hampshire State Nursery that I'm putting along a fence line that I'm hoping will get big enough to not only produce berries, but also provide good cover for some of my birds. So take a look at that. It's in one of the Facebook posts. You'll be able to see pictures of it and get some more information about the species. Okay. Hi, Arlene, Debbie, Peter. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. There's another post that you may have seen on Facebook that I wanted to mention as well, because this is a time of year when sometimes birds hit windows and occasionally you'll see a sort of a poofy mark of where the bird hit the window. This particularly happens with things like mourning doves and pigeons because they have what's called powder down. And powder down is actually a modified kind of feather, and it sort of disintegrates. And what they think that they use it is for helping to keep their feathers clean. It's found mostly in pigeons and doves and some woodpeckers, and those birds well, I have to back up for a moment. Most birds have oil glands, and they're at the base of their tail, and they reach down with their bill and tongue and they get oil from the oil gland and they preen their feathers with it to help keep their feathers in good condition. Now, these pigeons and doves and some of the woodpeckers don't have a really good functioning oil gland, so they have this powder down instead to help keep their feathers in good condition. And then when they hit the window, they leave a poofy powdered mark of powder down. Some of that powder down comes off of them and leaves the imprint on the window. Not all the birds will do that. And when you see that type of really obvious mark, then you can sort of make a guess that it was probably a mourning dove. They're the ones that are most commonly or most likely to do that because they're common feeders and they may bunk into your windows. Uh, Pigeons could do that, but I find that the pigeons, at least around me, are not coming into my feeders the way the mourning doves do. Uh, so that's a really fascinating part of bird biology is how they keep their feathers clean and in good condition. And the other thing that we've been getting some reports of recently are what's called leucistic birds. Now, these are birds where they're missing some pigment in some of their feathers. So they have a very odd whitish pattern. So recently somebody sent a picture of a chickadee where instead of the all black on the head, it's got black spotted with white. And then sometimes there'll be just some white feathers in their wings, like individual white feathers. I have a house sparrow here that has a couple of different white feathers on both of its wings, same feathers. And when it flies, it looks a little bit funny. And then sometimes there are leucistic cardinals where they're a very pale red color, or leucistic blue jays or juncos. And they can look very odd, and they can be very hard to identify too, because they don't look like the normal bird. So what I tend to suggest to people is take a look. If it's got white in odd places, but it's hanging out with a flock of juncos and it's the same size as the juncos and is behaving like the juncos, then it probably is a leucistic junco. So you can kind of go by size and shape and behavior and what other birds it's hanging out with. Now that leucism comes from a lack of pigment in some of the feathers. So it's not full albino, which is a total lack of pigment. It's just lack of pigment in some of the feathers. Sometimes it's individual feathers. Sometimes it's missing one particular kind of color, like missing all the black on the bird. But you can see all the browns. So it can be very interesting and different kind of pattern. So again, it's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. If you have a question, don't hesitate to post a comment here. And you can always email us at birdsetc@nhaudubon.org. You can go to our new website. We've got a place at the bottom of each page to make a comment. You can send us a question there as well. And of course, you can send a message to us on Facebook. I really appreciate you joining us. And I wanted to mention, what else did I got a couple of other things that I wanted to share with you. One thing that's very fun that's coming up for me is something called the Superbowl of Birding, which is not anything to do with football, but it happens at the last weekend in January. And teams go out and find as many species as they can in Rockingham County, New Hampshire, or Essex County, Massachusetts. And it's great fun. I'm in a team, normally we're a team of 4 called the Twitchers in the Rye. But this year with COVID, they've modified the rules because we have to split up. You have to be with people who are in your own bubble. So I'm actually going to be a team of 1, and I'm going to be competing for the Townie Award in the town of Seabrook, New Hampshire. So I will be birding from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. to see how many species I can find in Seabrook. And I'm also trying to get as many points as I can, and each bird is worth a different number of points. The rarer the bird is, the more points it's worth. And that's on a scale of 1 to 5. So common birds are worth 1 point, rare birds are worth 5 points. And if I find a rare bird, I have to call it in so that other people can find out about it, and it'll be fair to everybody in the competition. So there will be 3 teams at least competing for the Townie Awards. 2 of my fellow team members, normally in the Twitchers in the Rye, are going to be counting in 2 different towns, one in Hampton and one in Rye. So we will be having a lot of fun doing that. That's January 30th. You can find information about it on the New Hampshire Bird Records website. So if you just Google New Hampshire Bird Records, I'll try and post a link on Facebook as well. because it's really a fun competition. Our webpage has past results, which are fun to read. You can see what our different species are. When we start at 5 a.m., I'm usually looking for owls at that point because, of course, it's dark. And then we'll go until 5 p.m. So a lot of fun, and get to see a lot of different birds. I've never done Seabrook, New Hampshire. I've birded in Seabrook, but this will be a first time for me doing the Superbowl of Birding in Seabrook. So you can wish us luck, any of the team's luck. We are accepting pledges. This is a fundraiser for New Hampshire Bird Records and New Hampshire eBird. So all monies go to support those projects. But it's a lot of fun to have some creative pledges. Some folks do a certain dollar amount per species or per point, and it's just a lot of fun. And you can read about our exploits after the day happens. It'll be up sometime in February. So watch for that coming up too. I'll talk about that probably a little bit more because it's I get excited about it because it's a lot of fun to do. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention to folks. What was I had it on my list? Oh, did I talk about year lists? It's the beginning of the year and it's a good time to start one. I've got mine going. So I encourage you to think about that uh, and and think about keeping track of how many species you're seeing maybe in your yard this year. I have my survey, but I'm also keeping track of how many in my yard. It's something fun to do while we at home a lot with COVID-19. So there are still great birds out there. We're definitely in the midst of winter. There's very little migration going on right now. There have been a few snowy owl sightings on the coast, but it's not a big year for snowies this year. That seems to be the case pretty much throughout New England for snowies. Uh, and but we do have this great year going for some of those northern finches that I was mentioning. So you watch for them. I've got white-throated sparrows in my yard and house sparrows in my yard. Uh, so they may be coming into something like mixed seed. If any of you are in the towns of Seabrook or Hampton and Rye and have something unusual coming to your feeder, please don't hesitate to let us know about it. You can email New Hampshire Audubon and let us know. That's something that some of the upcoming Super Bowlers will be excited to know about. So if we can spread the word, that would be very much appreciated. All right, have we got any other questions about there as I'm sort of wrapping up from my ramble, my birding ramble? Uh, we'll be talking next time a little bit more about some of the southern species that have invaded from farther south. Invaded is probably not the right word. They've really extended their range northward, like the cardinals and the tufted titmice, mockingbirds, and mourning doves. Remember, they never used to be in the state. So back in the 1960s, it would have been very exciting to see any one of those species. A cardinal would have been worth a trip for birders to go look for it. So things have changed since then, and they're now pretty common in the southern part of the state. Although they're still kind of rare in northern Coos County. There are tough to find a cardinal in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. But they're around in much of the rest of the state. So bird distribution can certainly change in time. And so I'll be talking a little bit more about that as we've got the Backyard Winter Bird Survey coming up. We can look at some of that data and talk about how some of the species populations have changed. So I really appreciate you all joining me today. Don't hesitate to share any observations you've got. We like hearing what people are seeing. Again, it's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. We really appreciate your support. We're an independent nonprofit organization. We depend on support from folks like you to continue our work to protecting New Hampshire's wildlife. And we appreciate anything that you can do to help us accomplish our mission. You can make a donation on the website, send in a check. Anything that you can do is much appreciated. I see Chris has a question, so let me address that before we sign off. All right. New Hampshire is surprised not to find any cardinals here. Yeah, Lisbon, you're just on that northern edge there. The cardinals are very common in the southern half of the state. When you get to the White Mountains, they become much more unusual. Just north of the White Mountains, you're still finding them in Littleton and probably the Twin Mountain area. But then you start to go north from there, and there's very few. In fact, even in Littleton, there are very few cardinals there. So they've extended their range northward, but the White Mountains and then the boreal forests are a bit of a block for them. They are species that like sort of more mixed woods and edges, and obviously urban areas or suburban areas they can do very well in. But when you get farther north, they're the habitat is not as good for them, and there's probably some relation to the severity of the winter in that area. But keep your eye out. It's hard to tell how much they'll continue expanding their range northwards. Tufted titmouse mice have been seen in Pittsburgh, and cardinals have been seen in Errol, New Hampshire. So both of those are fairly far north. They just may not be very common. There'll be occasional birds. So, Chris, thanks for the comment. Thank you all for joining me. I will sign off and wish you good birding. It's a wonderful, safe way to get outside and enjoy nature and to help keep oneself calm during these very interesting times. Take care, everybody, and thank you.